Elena Vasquez stood at the window of her office, staring down at a world she barely recognized. The year was 4000 AD, and she was the 847th President of the United States. But the America she led looked nothing like the one from history books. Below her, floating in the sky, was New Washington. The entire capital city hovered thousands of feet above the ground, held up by technology that would seem like magic to people from centuries ago. The ground below was mostly empty now. What used to be cities and towns had crumbled long ago. Nature had taken back most of the land, but even nature looked different now. The trees were taller, the rivers had changed their paths, and the weather patterns were unlike anything her ancestors would recognize. Elena was 52 years old, but she felt much older. Being president in the year 4000 was not an honor anymore. It was a burden that kept her awake at night. She was not just leading a country. She was leading the last organized government left on planet Earth. Other nations had disappeared over the centuries. Some were destroyed in wars that history barely remembered. Others simply faded away as people scattered and formed new communities. Europe was now a collection of small villages that barely talked to each other. Asia had split into countless tiny territories, each one doing its own thing. Africa had returned to tribal systems that worked better for the people living there. South America was covered mostly in wild forests again, with only a few human settlements remaining. But America had survived. Through good luck, smart planning, and pure stubbornness, the United States kept going. The Constitution had been amended hundreds of times, but its core ideas remained. People still voted. There was still a Congress, though it met virtually now. There was still a Supreme Court, though the cases they handled would confuse anyone from the past. Elena's day started like any other. She reviewed reports from the Underlands, the massive tunnel systems where most Americans now lived. Millions of people had moved underground over the centuries as the surface became harder to live on. The tunnels were comfortable enough with artificial sunlight and climate control, but Elena knew people missed the real sky. Then came the message that would change everything. Dr. Marcus Chen, her chief scientist, appeared on her screen. His face was pale and his hands were shaking slightly. Elena had known Marcus for 20 years. She had never seen him look scared before. "Madam President, we need to talk. Right now." Elena felt her stomach tighten. "What is it, Marcus?" "I found something in the old data archives. Something that previous presidents kept classified." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Earth's magnetic field is collapsing. Not in 1,000 years. Not in 500. We have maybe 50 years before the planet becomes completely uninhabitable." The room seemed to spin around Elena. 50 years. That was nothing in the grand scheme of things. People living today would still be alive when Earth died. "How sure are you?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "Completely sure. The data is clear. And Madam President, there is more. Our people on the Moon and Mars, they already know. They have known for decades. That is why they stopped talking to us. They are preparing for a future that does not include Earth." Elena closed her eyes. The Moon colonies and Mars settlements had declared independence 300 years ago. They had their own governments now, their own cultures. They were born in space, and they did not feel connected to Earth anymore. She had tried reaching out to them countless times, but they ignored her messages. Now she understood why. "What are our options?" Elena asked. Marcus pulled up charts and graphs. "We can evacuate. We have enough ships to save maybe 40% of the population if we start building more vessels now. Or we can try to fix the magnetic field using geoengineering. But that would take all our resources, and it might not even work." Elena spent the next few days meeting with her team. Vice President Thomas Okonkwo was a practical man. He thought they should focus on evacuation. "We cannot save the planet," he said, "but we can save the people. That is what matters." But Sarah Williams, the Secretary of Technology, disagreed strongly. "If we give up on Earth, we give up on our home. Every human being who ever lived came from this planet. We owe it to them to try." Then there was General Rebecca Stone. She brought military intelligence that made everything more complicated. "The fringe settlements are planning something," she warned. "They have spies everywhere. When they find out about the evacuation plans, they will try to take the ships by force. We could be looking at a conflict unlike anything we have seen in centuries." The fringe settlements were areas beyond government control. Tough people lived there, survivors who did not trust the government. They had their own laws and their own way of doing things. Elena had always tried to leave them alone, believing in freedom of choice. but now that freedom might turn into violence. Late one night, Elena found herself reading old presidential documents. She discovered that President number 731, who served in the year 3847, had known about this crisis. That president, and several others after him, had tried secretly negotiating with Mars for help. But Mars had one condition that no president could accept. They wanted Earth to dissolve its government completely. They wanted America to just stop existing. Elena understood why previous presidents had hidden this information. What do you tell people when you know their world is ending? How do you keep society functioning when everyone knows there is no future? She walked through the halls of the floating Capitol, past portraits of all the presidents who came before her: Washington, Lincoln, Roosevelt, Obama, and hundreds more whose names were now forgotten by most people. Each one had faced their own crisis. Each one had made hard choices. But none of them had faced the end of Earth itself. The protests started within a week. Someone had leaked the information. People flooded the virtual town halls demanding answers. Some wanted immediate evacuation. Others insisted the government fix the planet. Many were simply angry that this had been kept secret for so long. Elena knew she had to make a choice that would define not just her presidency, but possibly the last chapter of human civilization on Earth. She could try to hold on to power and force a solution. She could be a strong leader who made the tough decisions without caring what people thought. Or she could trust the people, trust democracy, even when facing the end of everything. As she prepared to address the nation, Elena remembered something her grandmother had told her as a child. The measure of a leader is not how they handle success. It is how they handle the impossible. Elena was about to find out what kind of leader she really was. The message from Europa came on a Tuesday morning. Elena was in a meeting with her cabinet when her assistant interrupted, something that never happened unless it was truly urgent. "Madam President, we are receiving a transmission from Jupiter's moon, Europa. They say they have been watching us." The room went silent. Everyone knew about Europa. Centuries ago, scientists had discovered that beneath its frozen surface there was a vast ocean, but nobody expected to find an entire civilization living there. Yet about 200 years ago, the Europa Commonwealth had announced their existence to the rest of humanity. Since then, they had mostly kept to themselves, occasionally trading technology but never getting involved in Earth's problems. Until now. The transmission showed a being that looked almost human, but not quite. Their skin had a slight blue tint, probably from generations of living under ice with limited light. They spoke perfect English, though their accent was strange, musical almost. "President Vasquez, I am Delegate Mira of the Europa Commonwealth. We have watched Earth for many generations. We know about your magnetic field crisis. We can help you fix it." Elena felt hope rise in her chest, but she pushed it down. Nothing in politics was ever free. "What do you want in return?" Mira smiled. "We want your archives, everything, every book, every song, every piece of art, every scientific discovery, every bit of genetic information from every plant and animal that ever lived on Earth. We want the complete story of humanity's birthplace." It sounded reasonable at first. Europa would preserve Earth's legacy while Elena's people survived. But something felt wrong. Elena asked for time to consider the offer. That evening, Secretary Sarah Williams rushed into her office with shocking news. She had been analyzing the fine print of Europa's proposal with her team of experts. "They are not just asking for copies," Sarah explained, her voice tight with anger. "Their technology would let them recreate everything, including humans. They want Earth's genetic database so they can grow new people from scratch. They are planning to build their own version of humanity." Elena felt sick. "They want to replace us." "Not exactly. More like have a backup copy ready if we fail. But think about what that means. If we give them everything and then the evacuation does not work, Europa could just create new humans. Our people, our culture, our entire existence becomes optional. We become the rough draft and they make the final version." Before Elena could fully process this, alarms started blaring throughout the floating city. General Stone's voice came through on every speaker. "We are under attack. The fringe settlements have mobilized. They are coming for the evacuation ships." Elena ran to the command center. On the screen, she could see thousands of aircraft approaching from all directions. The fringe people had been building an army in secret, and now they were making their move. "They do not want to evacuate," Stone explained quickly. "They want the geoengineering equipment. They planned to save Earth themselves, but their way would require forcing everyone to work on the project. They are talking about suspending democracy, imposing martial law, whatever it takes. The battle lasted 3 hours. It was not like the wars from ancient times. There were no explosions or destruction. Both sides used electromagnetic weapons that disabled ships without harming people. Nobody wanted to start actually hurting each other. These were all Americans after all, even if they disagreed about everything else. When the fighting stopped, Elena found herself facing the leader of the fringe settlements. He had surrendered and asked to speak with her personally. They met in a secured room, just the two of them. The man removed his helmet and Elena gasped. She knew that face. She had seen it in family photos. "Hello, grandmother," he said quietly. His name was Thomas Vasquez. He was her grandson, though that seemed impossible. He looked 60 years old, maybe older. Then he explained about the time dilation experiments. In certain parts of the fringe territories, they had technology that made time move differently. Thomas had lived for 300 years in zones where time ran faster than the outside world. He had seen futures that had not happened yet. He had watched countless versions of how this crisis might end. "In every timeline where you evacuate, humanity loses itself," Thomas told her. "We become scattered refugees across space. Within 5 generations, Mars does not even speak English anymore. The moon colonies forget Earth completely. Nobody remembers what democracy means. We survive, but we stop being us." "And in the timelines where we stay and fight?" Elena asked. "Sometimes it works. Sometimes it does not. But in the ones where it works, where we force everyone to cooperate and save the planet, humanity stays united. We keep our culture. We keep our identity." He leaned forward. "You can be the last president of Earth, or you can be the first empress of humanity. Take control. Make the hard decisions. Force people to do what needs to be done." Elena looked at her grandson, this man who had lived centuries trying to find the right answer. "And who gets to decide what needs to be done?" "Me, you. What happens to freedom? What happens to choice?" "Freedom does not matter if everyone is dead," Thomas said. "And survival does not matter if we become something horrible," Elena replied. "The United States was built on an idea. The idea that people can govern themselves. That freedom matters more than efficiency. If I throw that away to save lives, then what exactly am I saving?" Thomas looked frustrated. "You're being naive. This is not about philosophy. This is about survival." "It has always been about philosophy," Elena said softly. "That is the point. That is what makes us human." The next day, help came from an unexpected source. The Mars Republic sent a delegation. They had been watching everything unfold, and they had a proposal. Not charity, not a rescue, but a partnership. The Mars representative was young, maybe 30, born and raised on another planet. "We left Earth because we wanted independence," she explained. "But we never stopped caring about where we came from. We will help evacuate your people. We will share the geoengineering technology for free. But in return, we want Earth to join us in creating something new." "What do you mean?" Elena asked. "A coalition government. Earth, Mars, Luna, the asteroid settlements all working together. Equal partners. No one in charge. No more presidents. Just representatives from every community working together." It meant the end of the United States as a nation, but it meant the beginning of something bigger. Elena spent 3 days thinking. She walked through the museums in the preserved zones, places where pieces of old Earth were kept exactly as they had been. She stood in front of the ruins of the Lincoln Memorial, touching the ancient stone. She thought about all 846 presidents who came before her. They had each added something to the story. Now it was her turn to write the ending. On the anniversary of America's founding, 2024 years after 1776, Elena gave her final speech. She stood on actual ground, not in a floating city. Behind her was the old Lincoln Memorial, weathered by 2,000 years but still standing. "My fellow Americans and my fellow humans across the solar system, I stand before you not just as your president, but as someone who loves Earth more than words can express. This planet gave us everything. It gave us life, culture, music, art, and love. It taught us what it means to be human." She paused, looking at the cameras broadcasting to every settlement in the solar system. "But Earth also taught us something else. It taught us that nothing lasts forever. And it taught us that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let go." Elena announced the final amendment. The presidency would end with her. The United States would transform into a distributed network of communities, each self-governing, each with equal access to the evacuation resources. And they would accept Mars's offer of partnership. There was anger. There were protests. Historians called her a traitor. Politicians said she had destroyed everything their ancestors built. But there were also celebrations. People who had felt powerless now felt hope. Communities that had been ignored now had a voice. The evacuation took 20 years. It was orderly, democratic, and fair. Everyone who wanted to leave could leave. Some chose to stay on Earth until the very end, living out their final years on the planet where humans began. 50 years after Elena's speech, a young girl on Mars sat in a history class. The teacher was talking about Earth, showing pictures of blue skies and green forests, things that existed only in recordings now. Was it beautiful? The girl asked. Her grandmother, who had been there, who had walked on real Earth before the evacuation, smiled with tears in her eyes. It was more than beautiful, sweetheart. It was home. And President Elena Vasquez made sure that even though we had to leave, we never forgot where we came from. She taught us that home is not just a place. It is the people you carry with you, and the values you refuse to give up no matter what. The girl thought about that. So she was a good president? The grandmother considered the question carefully. She was the last president, and maybe that was exactly what we needed her to be.